AC, I think I jinxed us last
Uh-oh.
month or last
Dang it.
time. I said that I was a little bit confused because we're escaping from Hammerland, but we've been watching a lot of really cool kind of movies this year. Not the cast-offs, not the forgotten films from this storied cinematic empire. No, these are overlooked classics. But then we come to
Wait a minute. Anyway, continue with your weighted preamble.
we come to X the Unknown from 1956. It's this movie is a genuine roller coaster because at points it's kind of a knuckle biter. At other points, I wrote down in my notes, you could call this movie Science Presents Boring Solutions to Exciting Problems. I don't know what's going on here. I don't know how this ties into the Quatermass franchise, but they seem to be kind of a piece. So I'm hoping to get into all of that with you, my dear friend, and also find out what you think of X the Unknown, and where it ranks in the Hammer pantheon. So we're going to get into all of that, and we are talking spoilers.
Yep.
Not that anyone is going to like bite our heads off, but you never know. So
I would
let's
hope
get to
not. I've never had my head bitten off, and I'm not ready to start now. Yeah, I do like X the Unknown. I don't think it is as strong as the Quatermass entries, the official Hammer Quatermass Experiment, Quatermass 2, and Quatermass in the Pit. And the reason it becomes, kind of an unofficial Quatermass movie is that it was designed to be a follow-up to the smash that was Quatermass Experiment. The hitch was that Nigel Neal, the creator of Professor Quatermass, was not involved, and therefore they could not, he didn't want them to do the script that they did. He was like, no, you can't have my property.
So we've established that Nigel Neal is very smart.
Correct. And we knew that. We knew that Nigel Neal was smart. He came up with the Quatermass movies.
Yes.
But anyway, yeah. So what Jimmy Sangster, who you may have recognized his name, and certainly Hammer fans will recognize Jimmy Sangster's name from a myriad of positions. He's directed, he wrote screenplays, he produced, and he's responsible for bringing Curse of Frankenstein and Dracula to the screen for Hammer. So he was a big deal. He was originally the production manager on this film. And somebody grabbed him and said, hey, go write us a screenplay for this because Nigel Neal won't let us use the Quatermass stuff. And so Jimmy Sangster was recruited, and this was his first screenplay. So that may contribute to some of the misgivings that you're expressing right now. But anyway, yeah. So he threw a script together right quick, and they ran it. And we have our character Professor Adam Royston in place of Professor Quatermass, played by Dean Jagger. Same kind of formula in that we have an American actor amidst all of the Brits. Dean Jagger was, I think he'd either won an Oscar or been nominated for an Oscar for 3 O'Clock High. And so he was a bit of a name, but he was mostly a supporting actor. So it's one of the rare times he got to take center stage. And I think he does a decent job. I think he does as serviceable a job as Brian Donlevy, even though it's a very different character. Like, I think he does a nice job of holding the center of this film.
I want to step back. You said 3 O'Clock High. That's not right?
I think it is. Maybe it's 12 O'Clock High.
Maybe it's 12 O'Clock High because 3 O'Clock High
is with Casey Siemaszko.
Yes, the 1987 movie. Yes, okay.
Not that. I think it may be 12 O'Clock High.
Okay, because I was thinking, wow, Jimmy Sangster not only made some great movies and this one, but he also mastered time travel. No, yes. It's not Sangster. Yes, our Dr. Royston, Professor Royston. Yeah, he's a doctor. Okay, that's fair. It's official. Yeah, I don't know. I think if we had watched all these movies sort of in order, even though this is
Sure.
an unofficial Quatermass movie, maybe I would have had an appreciation for it. But yeah, it's a lean movie in terms of runtime. We're
Sure.
talking like an hour 21,
Yep.
right? More like an hour 19, because the version I watched was like on an Internet Archive or something like that, and they tacked on the trailer at the very end, which
Oh,
was strange. Um, but
just
it
in
just
case you were excited to see this movie that you've already seen.
the trailer though was much more effective in terms of generating chills and thrills.
Mm,
You know, I don't know how I feel about this movie. I feel like if they'd called it Quatermass versus the Blob, I would have had a better time with it. But I mean, it's a mud monster that comes up from beneath the earth to feed on radiation and
yep.
attack the British military installation that is in Scotland, doing sort of like nuclear experiments and operations and things. I loved, strangely enough, I loved the exposition dump where they've got these big kind of eggheads in a room, including Dr. Royston posing theories on where this thing came from. And it goes all the way back to the beginning of the Earth when it was still just a giant spinning ball of energy.
Yep.
Fascinating stuff. And I did love, you got to go with me on this. Ridley Scott clearly ripped this off during the derelict scene in Alien, right? I mean, it's indisputable.
I'll go along with anything in terms of Ridley Scott ripping things off. Um, but okay, so one thing I want you did talk about the Blob, because we are talking spoilers. I mean, we
Yes.
spend the first hour of the movie of people recoiling in terror of something off camera, and then we reveal that it's a blob. Here's what's significant about that: this movie predates the Blob by 2 years. It is
Oh,
perhaps the first Blob movie.
okay. That does count for a lot because I thought the Blob came out in the earlier in the
58.
50s. Wow.
58.
Okay. All right. Then this movie is already
So
skyrocketing up in my estimation
So it's the first
by a little
Blob
bit.
movie, and I like the effects of the Blob. I mean, again, it doesn't show up until about 54 minutes in, and we get to see it a fair amount, but it's a long wait. And when it shows up, again, if you've seen a Blob movie, you're like, oh, it's a blob. What the hell? But again, nobody had seen a Blob before in 1956. So I think, that's why I give it a little bit more credit in seeing it in historical context.
And you know what? You're turning me around on this already. I
Do you
think
like the scenes of the Blob? I mean, I think the Blob effects are actually pretty well done in terms of the rear projection.
yes. However, I think it has one of the weaker final monster conflicts. We're jumping way ahead here, but
Yep,
it's a
yep,
short
all the
enough
way.
movie. Right. But I get it. Dr. I was going to call him Haywood. Dr. Royston
Yes.
develops this technology using radar or some kind of spinning thing to essentially create a containment field for radiation. If I have that right, there's so much talking in this movie. It's like the new Mission Impossible, and that's not a positive comparison. He contains this thing, but the very end is the monster grows to these insane proportions. It's getting ready to overrun the base. The military sets up these kind of twin radar towers that go spinning and doing their thing to catch the monster in its path. And the monster is glowing. It looks like when you're out at a campfire and you're roasting marshmallows and you get that just first layer of crust on it, but you can still see the marshmallow kind of like white underneath and the bit of the flame. It
Mhm.
looks like that. It's pulsating, it's crusty, it's weird. But the way this thing is shot is it's a dramatic, increasingly dramatic close-ups on radar spinning, increasingly dramatic close-ups on pulsating jello, and
Yep.
then a fireball. Like I get it. It's 1956. I got to give them some grace,
But what else
but
would you
I've seen
do? I mean,
anything, honestly, anything.
this is what we're given. We've got a Blob, we've got this means of
Right.
neutralizing it.
Yeah, but and in fairness, I need to put myself back in the 1956 mindset if I could. But it's because I've seen Blob movies since, particularly the 1988 Blob movie, which I think
Yep.
did a lot of marvelous things. Not necessarily in terms of the story or the acting that I had a problem with here. It's just that it is very like a lot of things in this movie in terms of the way it's shot. It's very flat. A lot of the kind of conventions that would come with like creeping terrors in the woods, those came in decades later. The
Yep.
two little boys out in the woods running around kind of like looking for this tower that's out there, then one of them goes off on his own and encounters the beast, which we don't see. We have this kind of like almost a Geiger counter kind of crackling effect, and then the Evil Dead POV coming and creeping up on him, and he screams and runs away. That's effective in moments, but mostly it's just very kind of flat. I think a more effective version of that is what happened to what was it, the Glick boys in Salem's Lot, which would come out, 20, 30 years later.
Yeah.
So this is one of those films that's frustrating to watch because I know it's foundational, it's cool for what it was, but I have seen movies that we've talked about that are within this same time period and a little bit later, I think offer a lot more, instead of me having to compartmentalize and be like, oh, it's of its time.
Yep.
They were thrilling right off the bat. And this just didn't quite get there for me.
Well, and I agree. And that's why we're waiting until, season 5 to talk about it.
Yes.
Because I think it is historically important. But I don't think it's what I would lead with if I was trying to introduce somebody to Hammer. But I think it is important to chat about. And I think it is interesting, when you hear things like, okay, this was meant to be a Quatermass movie. It is Jimmy Sangster's first screenplay. We see Michael Ripper for the first time in a Hammer movie.
Was this his
first Hammer horror that he appeared in? Because he's not, this is only number 2. That's the other thing to remember, is that this is number 2 for Hammer. They've done Abominable Snowman, I think actually, no, this is number 2. Abominable Snowman came the next year in 57, along with Quatermass 2.
So what was the first one was
Quatermass Experiment.
Okay. And
Yep.
then this
one.
Okay. Got it. Wow. And, I got to say, this is, automatically, Michael Ripper appearing in any film gives it a couple of points up. And I do like the fact that I've seen him in meteor roles. And I've also seen him, he's great even just here as like the kind of the mid-level military guy who's barking orders at people.
Yeah.
Very effective. It's strange because the first like 20 minutes of this movie just feels like military procedural. There's these guys out in this field doing drills with these, kind of detect radiation nodules and stuff. And there's the one guy who didn't get a chance to go out. Everyone's getting ready to pack up and head back to the barracks. And he's like, but sir, I didn't get my chance to go do the test. And everyone's like, oh God. And so two of his friends or I don't know if they're friends, they try and set him up, kind of prank him. That's all fun. It's like kind of like watching Stripes. But then I realized, wait, there's supposed to be a science fiction element to this movie. Where is it? And then we get it. And there's a lot of talking, a lot of theorizing. The actual theory of where the monster comes from is interesting. But then again, we get into, okay, here's this lab, and I'm going to make this mousetrap contraption that takes the thing and puts it into a waste disposal can. And we're going to come back to that mechanism like 4 times throughout the movie. And then we're setting up the radar, and they're moving the radar. And oh my gosh, the thing's attacking the base. Let's go get more radar. I didn't know what was, I had found it hard to latch onto until it started. I was going to say to rip off Alien. Alien ripped it off, but when they send the guy down into the crevasse,
Yep.
Where the beast emerged from, it is straight up Kane going down into the derelict ship. It's awesome, and I would love for someone, maybe they have already on YouTube, to do like a side-by-side shot comparison, because I think you'd pretty be startled if you haven't seen this movie.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think there's enough things in the film to recommend it. And I think you have to recognize that, yes, there are some flaws. Again, Jimmy Sangster's first movie. Also, Leslie Norman, who directed this, he was not the original director. Joseph Losey, an American director, was called in, and he was supposed to direct the movie, but he was under investigation from the House of Un-American Activities Committee, the Great Red Scare of the 50s.
He got whacked.
And Dean Jagger was a super anti-communist. And so when he heard Joseph Losey was going to be directing, he was like, nope, get him out. And so Leslie Norman gets called in. Leslie Norman has no interest in doing this movie. He's just gigging because they're telling him to direct it. So you have a director who isn't really invested in the material. You have a first-time screenwriter, and you have, we're inventing sci-fi as we go here. So yes, again, all of that combines to it not being the strongest Hammer effort. However, you got that face melting, which is just like, I'm like, where the hell did that come from?
There are two things that really caused me to recommend this movie. I know folks might be puzzled, like, wait, you've been trashing this thing for 15 minutes. What's going on? I never said I was consistent. However, I will say, so to your point, there are some great practical effects here with body parts melting. That guy Peter, the one who goes down to the crevasse, he encounters the melted, burned up remains of another guy who got dragged down there. It's quite horrifying, especially for 1956.
Yeah.
But also, I gotta recommend the performances in this
Yes.
movie. We've got Dean Jagger as Dr. Royston. But we've also got Leo McKern
Yep.
as Inspector McGill, aka Mac, and he's the guy from like one of the atomic agencies. He's an investigator out there to see what's going on, and is there a way to fix this problem other than just blowing it up or concretizing over the hole that this thing came out of, which is what the top military guy wants to do. They have a great rapport.
Yep.
And there was a genuine dramatic tension where towards the end of the film, they blow up the monster, they concrete over it, and then Mac gets called back off of his assignment. Headquarters is like, well, we heard this thing's done, so you're putting you on a plane back tonight. It's like, well, I gotta leave, but then I'm not quite so sure this thing is dead because, as I pointed out, talking to one of the generals, this thing crawled up out from the center of the earth. A little concrete wall isn't going to do anything. Nope. But when he gets called away, I thought immediately, oh no, Mac's dead. He's a goner. This is his. Oh, I think I'm going to escape, but my car is going to get overtaken by the monster, or he decides to stick around. He's going to be the guy to confront it and die saving everyone, and Royston's going to be sad. But no, they're both there to the end, and they're buddies, and I love that bond that they had.
I 100% agree. I love how they call each other Adam and Mac. They start off very professional, and then they become much more convivial. I love Leo McKern, like soon to be Rumpole of the Bailey in a couple of years with Masterpiece Theater.
That reference is totally lost on me, sir. Explain.
Certain audiences will. He's kind of like the Agatha Christie mystery series. I think Rumpole of the Bailey. He was I think a judge, and so he was different cases, different crimes coming before him. But he became a kind of a stalwart of BBC theater, BBC the TV. But yeah, also this movie has the gall to kill a kid 30 minutes in.
And I'm glad you reminded me of that, because that was a genuine shock.
Yeah.
And again, we've got the spoiler banner on, folks, so if you don't want to know, but it's little Willie. I think it was Willie and Ian. They're the kids out in the woods looking for this tower, and Willie gets he runs away, but he's got a serious case of like radiation poisoning or whatever this thing got on him. He's in the hospital bed. We cut back to him because one moment we see him, and then a few scenes later go by, we cut back to it looks like he's sleeping in the bed, like, oh, we're going to wake the kid up and ask him about what happened, all this other stuff. But no, couple of seconds of him sleeping, and the next thing you know, a sheet is being pulled over his head, and they start wheeling him out of the room like, oh my goodness. Not only did they kill the kid, as you mentioned, but I can't think of, aside from maybe the movie Clerks, where they show someone, it looks like they're just sleeping, and then it turns out they're dead. That was very well done. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think there's enough little things scattered throughout. Like you said, the performances are strong. Getting to see a blob on screen for the first time. I think also what's fun is, you get Philip Leakey doing the makeup effects. He would do the Curse of Frankenstein the next year. And I like the little, kind of like burn patchy stuff. I think it's interesting that it only gets them from the neck down. It doesn't seem to affect their face, but whatever. And you see in our opening credits, we see people that we're going to come to know and love, like James Bernard and John Hollingsworth doing our score and musical direction, respectively. James Needs as our editor, Anthony Hines as our producer, Jimmy Sangster we already mentioned. So there's a real warm nostalgia around this movie in a way that you don't get when you get to like the 70s, the late 70s, when Hammer's starting to slowly, die off, where you have names that you're like, I don't know who any of these people are. I don't have that same affection for them. I haven't grown up with them. But here you're like, yep, there's all of these names that I'm going to come and know to love from all of the Gothics.
And I think that's the kind of the confusion for me. I'm appreciating this more and more talking to you, but when I see those names come up on screen, because we've been talking about this show for 5 years, I know who all these folks are, and you're right. It gets me excited. So, and I kind of get that excitement, like, oh, this is kind of where a lot of them came from. They cut their teeth here.
Yep.
But man, it was a lot of growing up very fast.
Sure. And I get that, you think about kind of the leap from this movie to Curse of Frankenstein over the course of a year. Like that's the speed at which Hammer ascended and became a worldwide sensation.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even night and day. It is the beginning of the universe to the iPhone. I mean, it's but yeah, I initially was I intended to lead off with this. It's the final lines of dialogue from the film that I kind of felt this way before I started this conversation. There's kind of an explosion, and someone's like, oh, the creature's not really dead. And someone says to Royston, what was that? And Royston says, I don't know, but it shouldn't have happened.
It shouldn't have happened. Exactly. It's one of the wildest kind of like the end or is it's where it's just like, wait, what? You can't just end the movie there, but they do. And I'm like, wow, like you got to have some cojones to be like, no, we're going to leave it right there, saying, we don't know what happened. We don't have all the answers. And I think that's a really gutsy move, because in all of sci-fi, they fix it, they figure it out. And here it's like, no, there are still things we do not know, including that. And we don't know if we're actually out of trouble yet. So, it's kind of a weird cliffhanger, but it's a cliffhanger nonetheless.
Much like the little boy jumping out of the lake and taking the girl down in the rowboat at the end of Friday the 13th.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Where you're like, wait, what was that? What do you mean there was no boy? We saw it.
Hey, speaking of Friday the 13th, because I had to get the reference.
We must talk about Friday the 13th.
Do you know where I'm going with this? The scene in the hospital, the final chapter.
Sure.
I got total final chapter vibes from this, where you've got I think it was Royston and someone else are like leaving the hospital, and then you cut to the door of the radiology department. You're like,
yep,
that's kind of an odd thing. And then this guy opens the door and kind of like peeks around, and then we follow him back in, and he's going to make out with the comely nurse.
Yep.
And then they both encounter the horrible monster, and the guy is killed. That again, I think that entire franchise with Jason and the hockey mask and all that stuff, it all came from other places. In fact, one day my magnum opus is going to be a video essay of just every frame of Friday the 13th and where it came from. Yes.
I would watch that. I would watch that with great anticipation. But that is where we get, I referred to the guy's face melting. That's where that scene occurs, is that horn dog tech is, and that effect of the face melting is extremely well done. I mean, I think probably it's a wax dummy that, they expose to heat and it melts, but it really does the job in terms of storytelling, especially with the nurse just screaming hysterically. And then that fade out. It's like, wow, like it's a really effective sequence. And I think it's the biggest shock in the movie. Like, I think in terms of like horror scenes, it's probably that one.
I agree. And I think there's another sequence towards the very end of the film where the monster attacks the base, and you see the guy at the checkpoint who kind of goes, he's not exactly whistling, but he walks outside and and walks around the corner, and then you come back and you see the hands gripping the wall as he climbs his way back inside. It just his last noble act is to ring the alarm to let everybody know. And then when we
Yeah.
cut back to him, it's from his feet, and the camera tracks along, kind of looks normal, but then we notice, oh, his pants are smoking, and
Yep.
he's got holes in his jacket, and up his
His
face.
head's gone.
But it's interesting because with the radiologist guy we just talked about, we see kind of everything. In this, it's more realistic because the guy died face down, and we don't get a good shot of his face. We get the back top of his head and the kind of the melted ear.
Yeah.
It's really creepy.
Yeah. Yeah. There are things I like. If I can make a shameless plug for my own show,
Of course.
we did a Quatermass, kind of like the entire legacy, talking about the three Hammer films as well as the BBC productions, and we threw this one in as well. And I think all of us were like, you know what? This is not Quatermass, but it's still pretty enjoyable. And again, I think just from a historical standpoint of like, oh wow, this is Hammer like figuring it out, like how this is going to go. So I mean, it was fun to revisit this film after having seen it kind of in context of the Quatermass universe, like just kind of watching it on its own. I'm like, this is straight up, fun 50 sci-fi flick that I think the performances really do sell it. I didn't write down the actor, but the guy who plays kind of the stodgy John Elliott, the guy who was in charge of the research project, like I think he's a great foil to both Royston and Mac McGill, because both of them are like, they don't have a reputation to preserve. He does. And so he's trying to keep things on track, but he also has a very vulnerable moment where he's like, I was wrong and I'm sorry.
Well, he was wrong, but I mean, we would see a different treatment of this kind of character in later films because he's not a villain.
No.
He is a rational kind of man of science who has a responsibility over this entire installation, and he wants to follow the science, as it were.
Yeah.
He survives the movie. I mean, there's one shot where a bunch of them are gathered in, I think, one of the labs, and you can actually see the monster coming through the wall.
Yeah.
And then everyone leaves, and he kind of hangs back to look at it because I think he's in shock and like, oh, here's the moment where it breaks through and eats him. But no, he gets out.
Yeah.
But I did like that kind of take on the character. The one I loved was the military guy. I don't know if he's the general, but he's the one who ordered the explosions and the concreting over of things. He has a great line. He said, the problem with these scientific types is they never see the easy way out of things. Because they're like, no, we got to study it and find out what's going on. Like, no, just blow it up.
Just blow it up and cement it over. It's yeah. Anyway, there's some politics right there.
Yeah.
That we'll talk about at some other time, perhaps
I'm
off
sure.
camera.
I'm sure. But you mentioned this isn't Quatermass, and it's not Quatermass. It's Dr. Royston. And I want to, maybe you know this, maybe you've got a theory about it, but my recollection of the other Quatermass movies, which we've watched over the last couple of years, so my recollection is a bit fuzzy. But Quatermass was kind of a jerk. He was
Yes.
he was the Yank in the he was kind of like a thorn in the side of the British military when he was over there. Kind of like not exactly a wisecracker, but he wasn't exactly buttoned up and cooperative in the way that Dr. Royston is. Royston has his own thing going on, but he's not really acerbic. Now, do you think this was something that Sangster incorporated as a way of differentiating these characters to not get in trouble? Or
I don't know. I mean, I don't even know if it was that so much as it is just trying to provide something that's different than the Quatermass, who is completely not concerned with humanity. He's more concerned with his experiment and whether it works or not. I mean, I think that's kind of the hallmark of Quatermass, is that it's secondary. Like he's concerned with the experiment more so than the fallout from it, especially the human collateral damage.
Which we would see the kind of the dark evolution in the next decade with what Hammer did with Frankenstein and Peter Cushing and those. I can't remember how many movies are there. I was going to say trilogy, but there's like 5 or 6 or 20 of them. I don't know.
Of the Frankensteins, there's 6.
6. Okay. Um, and we've talked about all of them. And
We
I missed
have.
them.
And we've talked
I
about the
missed them.
7 Dracula movies too.
Oh, wow. And now we're talking about the
Actually,
fourth.
sorry. There's 7 if we count the Ralph Bates Frankenstein, which of course we should.
It's Ralph Bates, man.
I know you love your Ralph Bates. So there were 6 Cushing Frankensteins and then the 7th with Ralph Bates, which is directed by Jimmy Sangster.
There you go. One thing I did notice, it was apropos of nothing, but early on when the accident happens at the base, it looks like some press or some people show up and they're kind of like asking questions about what happened. There was a guy there who looked exactly like Jake Tapper, the journalist. He just had the book that came out on the Biden administration.
Oh, really?
He's
Okay.
like the anchor. It looked like AI. Someone had requested, hey, Chat GPT, can you put Jake Tapper in X the Unknown for
Can
like
you
2
ask
minutes?
Chat GPT to do that?
Yeah.
Is that something that they could do?
Well, you can ask it to do anything. I don't know if it would comply.
Well, great. Yeah. You have not tried this experiment yet.
No. I have not tried this particular Quatermass experiment. So I don't know. I'm trying to see, is there anything else that we want to cover here in terms of this movie? I feel like we're pretty, we've given a fair shrift. And I dare say, sir, I'm going to watch this movie again someday.
Okay, great.
And I'm going to like it a lot more than I did the first time around because of this very enlightening conversation.
Well, again, I mean, context is everything, like I think it's tough sometimes when you don't realize that you're seeing something for the first time. And also I think, like I would argue the Blob did the Blob much better than, X the Unknown. So, like just because somebody came up with it first doesn't mean it's better. It just means they came up with it first. And I think that's recognizing that and acknowledging it and then going, okay, and I'm still going to watch the Blob a lot more times than I watch X the Unknown. But I think it's important to be able to acknowledge that, hey, it wasn't the first Blob movie or the last Blob movie. Kaltiki, the Immortal Monster, which was, directed by Mario Bava, that is also a Blob movie. And that came out the year after the Blob, but nobody talks about that one. Like the Blob nailed it. The Blob is like the quintessential Blob movie. Also, just another shameless plug, we did a comparison of the 58 and the 88 on the show at one point. And it was really fun to compare those 2 movies, like the technology of the 80s versus the technology of the 50s.
I remember watching the Blob for the first time, the 88 one, when I was, 11 years old on home video. And the scene, I think it's when they're climbing up out of the sewer. I haven't watched it in forever, but it was like the blonde best friend, he gets killed. And me and all of my friends were upset because you talk about, you don't kill kids in these movies,
right?
Teenagers and camp counselors, that's one thing, but like the best friend, no.
Yeah, you killed an actual kid. And it's like, again, I have the same kind of reaction. But again, in 1956, they did it. They went, not as dramatically and not as gory, but they killed a friggin' kid in 1956. So hats off.
We talked about Chat GPT. I want to put something out there because I know the internet is listening, and Chat GPT for that matter. One day, as we approach, that time we're going to have these devices installed on all of our heads, or you can join me in my little commune up in the mountains because I'll be there years before this happens.
I'll be right there striking the flint and making the fire.
Awesome. It would be interesting if you could somehow calibrate a setting in your mind when you watch an older movie to say, I want 1956 context brain.
Yep.
So I can see it for the first time, or some kind of a blend, like turn off this level of cynicism, turn off, I've seen XYZ movies, so I'm not going to be impressed by what I'm about to watch.
Yeah, no, I would love that to be a setting because it would make a lot less work. But I mean, people are going to be discovering movies at different points in their cinematic journey. If you watch this when you were a kid it would resonate in a different way than coming to it as a 40, 50 something, where you're like, oh, I've seen a lot of other movies like this and better than this. So putting this one in its place, literally in a positive way, I think is helpful.
I agree. And I think what I love is that in the last half hour or so, we've made known X the unknown. I've had a lot of questions answered for me by you, and your generosity and your patience, as always, is appreciated. And yeah, folks out there, if you have no idea what we're talking about, A, well, we've had the spoiler banner on the entire time, so that's your fault.
Right.
But B, check out this movie, check out the Quatermass movies, check out our conversations about all of them, check out AC's deep dives on his channel, Horror 101 with Dr. AC, that we've mentioned a couple times. Links for all that stuff is going to be down below. And AC, do you remember what we're talking about in July? I should handy, but I don't. Did we even decide on what we're talking about?
We do have a decision. I can't remember what it is. I probably could if you wanted to take the time to do it, or we could just leave it as a surprise.
I like the idea of the surprises for both of us. Oh, wait, hold on a second. Oh, no, I have it here.
Good. Is it dinosaurs?
No, it is Paranoiac.
Ah, excellent. Excellent.
When Dinosaurs Rule the Earth, we've got on tap for September, but what's the decision that we got to make?
The decision?
I thought I got the impression that there was like something we would have to like decide between. Or,
no. I'm excited that we're going to be talking Paranoiac.
Okay.
And then it's going to be.
Why are you excited? Who have you been talking to? Sorry.
Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they aren't after you.
That's right. Now, what's Paranoiac? I have no idea what it's about.
It is Oliver Reed, and it's it's one of the Psycho-influenced thrillers that came out in the wake of Psycho.
Excellent. All right. With Oliver Reed. All right. I'm officially excited. So yeah, folks, come back for that one sometime in July. We're doing these every other month. So we're wrapping up our May installment. This is coming out like the very end of May. So it's practically June, which is still not cheating. But AC, thank you very much for hanging out, as always, guiding me through this journey as we continue our escape from Hammerland. Folks, again, check out all of AC's stuff. Information is down below. If you like this show, please like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, tell all your friends, tell your enemies. They might enjoy movies too.
Tick them off.
Yeah, exactly. Enrage your enemies by having them watch Kicking the Seat. Yeah, until next time, whenever that is, whatever that is, thank you very much and take care. Hey everyone, Ian here. I know, long time no see, but if you like the video you just watched, feel free to subscribe to Kicking the Seat right here, and also check out the playlist and recommended video right here. Thanks for watching.